Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we're going to be answering two questions we've recently received. That's right, folks, you get two for the price of one video. The first question was, I was given a tour and I talked about the thickest single piece of armor plate on the ship. So the next question was, well, what is the thickest layered bit of armor on the ship? So we're going to talk about that. And another question is, I've often talked about how concrete bad. Don't put concrete on steel ships. We'll talk about that more. But somebody asked, well, yeah, but don't they use concrete as part of the armor? Why is the Navy using concrete? So we're going to talk about that today too, because both answers involve the same thing. And that same thing is the faceplate of one of the gun turrets. So this is the thickest layering of armor on the ship, unless you start getting into, well, if you're shooting through the belt of the ship, you've got to go through this, and then there's a gap, and then this. No, this is all sandwiched together. You've got 17 inches of armor plate with an inch of concrete and then 2.5 inches of backer plate, all sandwiched together as one solid piece that a projectile has to punch through to get into the turret. It's especially effective because the turret is going to be pointing at whatever's shooting at us, as we're going to be shooting at whatever the biggest thing out there is. So even though this is thicker than armor on the rest of the turret, doesn't matter. This is what's pointing at the target, and it's angled, so it gives it an even greater equivalent thickness. And the only time New Jersey was ever hit by enemy fire, guess what they hit? Faceplate of this turret right here, very close to where I'm standing. So, very effective piece of armor plate. Didn't even dent it, didn't leave any marks. Can't tell where we were hit, except where the ladder was damaged and they had to cut it off and weld it 1/4 inch next to it. You can see the cut marks from the old ladder. So, thickest layering of armor on the entire ship, but they use concrete there. And I say concrete is bad.
Concrete is terrible for steel.
So do I really know better than the Navy? Many museum ships use concrete on their decks. When the wood starts to rot, they just pour concrete in the patch, or like Texas did many years ago and have since fixed, or Olympia did many years ago and are still in the process of fixing, the wood starts to rot and they just pour a layer of concrete on top of that to just forget about it. It's cheap, it's easy, it gets the job done, but you cause several problems. One, you're adding a lot of top weight above the waterline. So that's causing all sorts of problems to your balance, especially since these ships are not as laden as they would normally be. They're not as low in the water as they should be. So ballast should not be 30 feet above the waterline, it should be 30 feet below the waterline. So that's one problem. As far as I know, it hasn't led to the loss of any museum ships. None of them have rolled over, but it's something to be concerned about. Two, concrete is not waterproof. It's porous. But steel is waterproof. So when it rains, the water goes through the concrete and gets down to the steel. Well, now it's protected by the concrete, which means that air is not evaporating it. It's staying in there and just continuing to sit against the steel and rot it away. And what's more, as it passes through the concrete, it's picking up some of the material from the concrete, and it's essentially becoming more basic, so that further corrodes. It almost acts like an acid and corrodes the steel underneath, even quicker than if it was just regular water. So it is a cheap and easy fix. If it's a patch that, hey, we need something that gets through the next year because this is a tripping hazard, fine. If it's, we don't have the money to replace the deck, so we're just going to lay concrete over it, you are causing yourself so many problems down the line. Avoid it at all costs. And I should say, this was something that was done on early museum ships. It's not something that museum ships still do today. We've learned that lesson. So if we know that concrete is bad, super destructive to ships, why is the Navy using it? There's a couple of reasons here. One, it actually, the composition of concrete, the way concrete reacts to being hit, is actually super effective for this type of armor. Two, it is not somewhere where it can get wet. And three, the Navy never intended these ships to last a long enough period of time to have the concrete be an issue, even if it was getting wet. Let's go through that in reverse order. Battleships are typically designed to last for about 20 years before they're made obsolete. Maybe you can get 25 or maybe 30 years out of them with a major upgrade somewhere during their career. The fact that the Iowa-class battleships lasted as long as they did, and that we have 8 battleships in this country that we're still preserving as museum ships 80 or 100 years down the line, is something that Navy designers never thought of when they were choosing the materials. They would have almost certainly made different choices if that were the case. So 2, it's watertight. This is sandwiched inside the armor of the turret. And the armor of the turret, you notice I said that this was 17 inches thick, but this is not 17 inches. There's actually a notch cut out of it and a notch cut out of this side plate, so they'll mesh together. Likewise, where they meet on the bottom, where they meet on the top, there is this opening that's actually caulked shut, much like you would caulk a wooden deck. So the concrete in there has steel on all 4 sides of it, so it is, on all 6 sides of it, it's cubic, so it is not getting any water to it. And again, it's not designed to last that long, so even if something happens and water gets to it, oh no. How long? It takes about 10 years or so for concrete to waste through a 1/2-inch steel deck with water. So we're looking at 17 inches here. How many decades is it going to take for that concrete to corrode all the way through this and cause problems? This is a little bit thicker than the deck of the ship. It's a lot less of a problem. And the third reason to use it is because it's really effective. The armor on the turret is almost designed to work like other armor on the ship, where the projectile is using up a lot of its force punching through the armor, but the armor is brittle. So beneath that, there's a more ductile layer, that 2.5-inch thick backer plate, so that's not going to shatter like the frontal armor. So the concrete is actually working a lot like ceramic armor does today. A projectile strikes the face of this, and it, one, this has a backing now. The plates aren't perfectly smooth. So by pouring concrete in there that fills in the gaps, now there is a hard backing here that's going to make this more resistant. 2, when this is struck, even if it's not defeated, it may be deformed inwards. And that inward deformation would then be translated to the 2.5-inch backer plate, and that might deform enough to tear because it's so much thinner. Well, by having that concrete in between, it works like ceramic armor so that it is dispersing that shock across the entire face of the turret. The concrete is brittle, it will shatter. And it's okay if it does that because it's just concrete. Whereas this steel plate, super expensive, took months to make. We probably can't replace it today because of how thick it is. We just don't make steel this big anymore. But the concrete, yeah, we can remove this faceplate, pour new concrete, we're good. So that will deform and disperse the energy across the entire face of the turret, so it's being dispersed across the entire backer plate instead of focused on one point of that much thinner, much more elastic 2.5-inch backer plate. I am not aware of any instance of frontal turret armor on an American battleship ever being defeated by an enemy shell. It is a super effective system that is not, that does not affect the longevity of the ship the way that pouring concrete on the deck does. So we've been talking a little bit about replacing our deck in today's video. Do you have a piece of our deck? It makes a great holiday present. Check the link in the description below to our store. You can find both raw pieces of teak that you can get torn up straight from the deck, or products made from our teak by either veterans of this ship or volunteers who work on this ship who are using the ship's actual original carpentry shop to make things like clocks and silhouettes of the ship and other finished goods. Be sure to check it out. It makes a great holiday present, makes a great present for just yourselves. I have one of the clocks on my desk currently. Also, if you're interested in the armor, there's a link down below to the Amazon page where you can buy John Miano's book on the Iowa-class battleship armor, which is how I found out how the concrete in the armor scheme works. So those are two great ideas for the holidays. Check those links in the description below. It supports the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and the channel. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State and also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate it. Thanks for watching.